Back in the day, and I'm talking back when just about everything was two-lane roads, and even back before CBs became popular, truck drivers would use signals to send each other a message as they were going by. So a guy would be coming by you on the two-lane, you'd be almost face-to-face. And we had a couple of hand signals we used to use. For instance, if there were cops up ahead, if the guy was headed for a cop and you just passed him, you'd do this. You'd hold up the peace sign sideways. And that would mean the guy's going to encounter a cop. Or this also, to signify the twirling lights on the roof. This meant that you were going to run into a cop. Or the other thing that we used to do, and they still do it today every once in a while, it's nice to see, is we'd blink the headlights at the guy coming at us and just flash him a couple of times. He'd know that something was up ahead. At night, it was pretty tough to signal for a cop, but often you'd say hi to the guy, and it was the Greyhound guys that actually started this. A guy would be coming at you at night, and you just turn on your left blinker and let it flash once or maybe twice and then shut it off, and that just said hi. So you would do the same back to him, just flash the front blinker once or twice, and if you weren't quick enough to get to your blinker arm by the time he went by, you knew that he was looking behind himself there in the mirror, and you'd just flash your trailer lights, and that was kind of like waving and saying hi and going the other direction at the same time. Back in the day when you broke down, you'd wheel the truck over as far off the road as you could. You get out beside the truck and you do this. And somebody'd pull in to give you a hand. And often, if it was a truck, another truck coming along, he'd just pull in automatically. Because it was like that back then. Guys would check on one another, make sure everybody was okay. Everybody carried spare parts because you never knew when you were going to need a fan belt or something like that. There were no cell phones, and it could be miles to a phone booth. So often, you'd see a guy broke down on the road, he needed a fan belt. The motors were far more common for swapping parts out and stuff. So he'd wheel in, hand him a fan belt. If he didn't have one, he'd buy you coffee at the next truck stop, and off you'd go. And of course, CBs made it a lot easier when you got further down the road. You could talk to the CB and send messages or call for help. And CBs became like a real plus in the 70s, and everybody used them. But you had to be careful because one of the first groups to get CB radios were the cops. So they would listen to everything you say. So if you saw a buddy going the other way and yell at him, say, hey, there's a bear about 2 miles behind me. Oftentimes the bear would get mad because you'd revealed his position. He'd come and track you down and pull you over, maybe give you some sort of a ticket just for ratting him out, But CBs, boy, that was a big thing. And it's too bad because these days it's kind of just a radio for trash talk, and it's not much good for anything else. But back in the 70s and the 80s, everybody had big peaked up CBs, and you could communicate for miles and tell everybody where there was a wreck or where there was a cop. They were very handy. Anyway, the signs are pretty much gone these days from truck drivers. Hell, they hardly even communicate with each other anymore. Half of them don't listen to the CB, or better than half anymore. They're plugged into their iPhones or their iTunes or something. But it's been a loss to the trucking as I did it, as I enjoyed it. And I think that's a serious loss. But something that everybody did back in the day is if another truck was going by you, you'd make sure you had enough room out in front, you'd cleared your front, and then you'd flash him the lights so he knew he was safe to come back in. And everybody did that. Today, virtually nobody does that. And I think that's a sad thing. That was something that showed camaraderie out on the highway, and that kind of stuff's just lost today, and that's too bad. Thinking about the old days brings me to a story. I haven't told a story in a little while. The story of my friend Choke Chain Bart. And we called him Choke Chain because he was one of the last guys I knew to wear one of this style trucker wallet. It's hooked to your belt loop so he doesn't lose it, but he always had one. He even ran one up into the late 80s, one of these wallets, but he's famous for it. But Choke Chain was a real hard runner. Man, he'd go and go and go. And this is in the days before the logbooks, and he would just go till he dropped, then grab sleep for a couple hours wherever he wiped out, like wherever he was so beat he couldn't go any farther. And he would just find a spot, land, and pass out for a few hours, get up and go again. So we were pulling a lot of hanging meat back then. And a friend of mine and I were headed east, coming out of the prairies with hanging meat loads. And we're rolling along, and we see Bart's truck stopped in one of the little mom and pop truck stops, and thought, oh, well, we'll wheel in for a coffee. We haven't seen him for a while. We carved it in and went into the little truck stop looking for Bart. And Bart wasn't in there. And after a few minutes of looking around, we figured out that Bart had, worn himself out and crawled into the bunk and gone for a nap and crashed right out. And he'd be just beat because he'd go for a couple days at a time sometimes. So my buddy hopped in Bart's truck, and nobody locked their trucks back then. There was no need to. My buddy hopped in Bart's truck and turned it around in the parking lot. When we landed, it was facing east. He swung it around so it was facing west. Hopped out, closed the door, and off we went. And again, now remember, this is on all 2-lane roads and everything looks the same, going either direction. So we didn't think anything more about it, but we were glad we were maybe going to beat Bart into the city to get unloaded, because it was a one truck at a time deal, and you didn't want to wait all day to get unloaded. So we thought, well, we'll be ahead of Bart there anyway. So we rolled on through the next day, and Bart never did catch us, and we thought that was pretty unusual, because Bart traveled like a raped ape. And finally we phoned in to say we were empty, and we had to know. And I said to the dispatcher, I said, "Where's Bart? We thought he'd be here by now." He says, "Oh, that's the strangest thing, He went to bed and called us before he went to bed in this city. And the next day, about lunchtime, he phones us, and he's gone back east like 300 miles in the wrong direction before he realized he was going the wrong way, and then spun around. And he still doesn't know how he made that mistake, but he's way behind you still. He won't be there till tomorrow." And we never said a word. We just laughed, kept our mouths shut, never told Bart, because he'd have thumped the hell out of both of us, and that was it. And we were on our way. Anyway, stay safe, take care, don't pull dirty tricks on your friends, and I'll see you on the back haul.